Hey everybody, thank you so much for coming out early. My name is Daniel Burwen. I'm the creative director of a little project called CIA Operation Ajax. And my talk today is Welcome to the Age of the Interface. So it's a pleasure to be here. I came all the way from San Francisco. Packed house. I'm totally going to Facebook you guys after this just to show everyone how cool I am. But without further ado, a little bit about myself. My background is in graphic design and video games, so I consider myself a storyteller that works at the intersection of art and technology. I used to work for Electronic Arts, Activision, lately for Disney Imagineering, and of course my project Operation Ajax. And I basically want to sort of have you guys be thinking a little bit about this book today as we talk about what the age of the interface is. Technology inspires art, and art challenges the technology. John Lasseter was the director of Toy Story, Pixar's first animator, and I think this is a really interesting quote to keep in the back of your mind today as we sort of talk about this relationship between art and technology and how those two things interact and move forward. So there's two sort of major pieces I want to sort of present to you guys first. Filming games, right? Two very established modalities for telling stories. Just to sort of contrast these things, this is the Horse in Motion from 1878. This is the first, supposedly according to the internet, the first video that was ever produced. And it's fascinating because it's pretty good looking for being the first film. There's motion, you know what it is, it's recognizable. What I find so interesting is that it took almost 100 years later to make 3 dots move around on the screen. So this is Pong from 1972. Anyway, sorry about that. So basically, you've got two very different modalities for telling stories. You've got film, which is passive, versus games, which are interactive. Film doesn't really have an interface, right? You have a TV and a couch or a theater. You maybe press the play button, and that's about it. Maybe you pause it to go to the bathroom. That's, if you go to see a movie in a theater, there actually isn't really an interface at all. You just sit in your chair and you wait, and the lights go down, and you watch the movie, and then they come up and you leave. Games, however, from the get-go require an interface. There's no way to play a game without participating at some level. So basically something happens that sort of ties these things together universally. They're normally separate experiences. In 1993, a movie comes out, I think, that forever sort of changes the sort of course of these two experiences.
This species of variformin's been extinct since the Cretaceous period. I mean, this thing is a this thing.
It's a dinosaur.
You guys all remember Jurassic Park, right? You see that and you're like, oh my god, that's totally realistic. And I think games had, or rather film had really maxed out in a way. 1993, this is what's going on in video games. This is the first real-time 3D video game called Virtua Fighter. And when I saw both of these things in the same year, it's like my mind kind of got blown twice. What I think is so interesting about this is that what this means is 3D as a tool for storytelling has sort of arrived in both of these mediums. And that means the technology as an underlying factor has also finally arrived in both these mediums. And film is now sort of a technology industry as much as it is a photographic one. So just to contrast these a little bit further, they have very different levels of what I call visual fidelity. Film starts out with the Horse in Motion looking pretty good, and honestly, even though we add sound and we add color and HD and visual effects and now 3D, right? The experience of watching the Horse in Motion versus Jurassic Park is actually fundamentally the same experience. However, if you look at Pong in 1972 and then what's going on up through Virtua Fighter, it's starting at this very low level of visual fidelity. It's 3 pixels essentially. And when we hit Virtua Fighter, this interesting thing happens where this curve is just starting to ramp up exponentially. So while film is sort of leveling out around Jurassic Park, and we get little blips here and there with like Avatar and things like that, games are just starting to hit this like rocket, sort of angle upwards, where they sort of eventually, I think, will converge in some sort of interesting way in the future. So, the next year in 1994, the Sony PlayStation comes out, the first mainstream 3D console, and ever since then, it's just been this sort of roadmap upwards. So if you want to think about visual fidelity as what I call texture memory in these consoles, we have 2 megabytes in the PlayStation 1, we go to 4 megabytes in the PlayStation 2, and we go to 256 in the PlayStation 3. It's really an exponential curve. And I have it leveling out here because it's 2012 and we haven't seen a new PlayStation yet. We're sort of due for one. So essentially what this means is the console lifespan is approximately every 6 years. And the emphasis on this technology has been on visual fidelity. How do we make these games look better and better and better? And fidelity is looking awesome now in games. This is Virtua Fighter now, quite a contrast, I think, to the one we saw before. And just to sort of show you what's happening right now in the age of visual fidelity in games, this is a video of the latest graphics card from NVIDIA called Kepler. And what it's doing is it's doing what's called real-time ray tracing. So for anyone here familiar with computer graphics, ray tracing is done essentially as a way to sort of pre-render stuff. And now we're seeing the ability to reflect glass and do physics and all this stuff that would normally take a render farm, many, many hours, done in real time on the fly. This graphic card is actually shipping in the latest iMac, so it's out now, and you can do stuff that looks like this. So what's so interesting to me about this is that while all this emphasis has been on visual fidelity in the past, the interface has hardly changed at all. If you think about the controller on the PlayStation 1 versus the PlayStation 3, from 1994 to 2006, it's almost the same. We get wireless connectivity and the dual analog sticks, but essentially it's the same thing. And it's never been a terribly accessible model. What happens, the same year that the PlayStation 3 comes out, the Nintendo Wii gets introduced, and radically changes the industry because even though it's half the fidelity curve, it introduces a new interface. And it's fascinating to think the impact that the Wii has had now because it's such a change maker in sort of how we consider what video games are today. This is a quote from Gunhei Yokoi, the inventor of the D-pad, also the Game Boy, one of Nintendo's sort of founding members. It says, in video games, there's an easy way out. If you don't have any good ideas, CPU competition. And that's really what we've seen, I think, from Xbox and from Sony. And it's no surprise then that the Wii goes on to become this ridiculously successful piece of equipment. It outgrosses the PlayStation and the Xbox combined. It sells out every month for the first 3 years after its release. It's in old folks' homes, it's in malls. It's really become sort of a console for the people. It's a disruptive technology. And it did have quite an effect. I mean, Sony and Microsoft, we haven't seen new consoles for the Xbox and the PlayStation 6 years after their inception. But we have seen the PlayStation move and we have seen the Kinect. And so I really think it shows that, now sensors and detection is really becoming a big emphasis in technology now. And all sorts of crazy stuff's coming out. Google Glass is going to be a fascinating way to see how that affects us and if augmented reality is something we really want or not. It's kind of a bizarre concept that you can wear a visor over your face and you can be, blasting stuff to social media while actually looking someone in the eye. It's, kind of a little strange. And then Leap 3D. Show of hands, how many people here actually know what Leap 3D is? Like 5 of you? Oh man, I just showed a video. Okay, so Leap 3D is this like little dongle that sits on your desk, and it projects a space of, 3 cubic feet or something in front of your computer monitor, and it can detect motion within a 1/10 of a millimeter with hundreds of points of data. So you can pinch and zoom and gesture in front of your computer screen and get really finite control. And this thing's going to cost $70 and it's wireless and sits right there. And so suddenly you can do Minority Report, in front of your computer and flip stuff around and stuff. So again, these are examples of other potentially disruptive technologies. We don't really know how they're going to mesh with our society, but it's a great concept to think about, how radically it changes things when you introduce a new interface. Working at Disney, I got to sort of check out this thing called Touché. It turns any surface into a touchscreen. Really trippy concept. It's a wire that you can wear on your wrist, and you can navigate your phone, by touching your hand. So anyway, it's interesting stuff to think about. So I guess my point here is that the emphasis has switched from visual fidelity to interface in our technology and our media. So to digress from consoles for a minute and talk about mobile computing, you guys remember how cell phones used to be, right? You had all these different models with different buttons and all sorts of folding designs. Like I had one of the first Palm Pilots who scratched at the screen with the stylus, and it kind of worked, but not really. And you lose the stylus, and you're like, why can't I do the thing? No one really had a right solution here. So you had the N gauge in the middle. That was a terrible idea. And it's just all these really fascinating experiments. And then, of course, Apple's like, haha, we use this. And everyone's like, oh, right. And so, again, another disruptive technology that makes mobile computing accessible. And now all cell phones kind of look like this, right? So it's just another example about how a disruptive technology comes into a space and suddenly everyone's like, oh, right, that's what we wanted, right? And now cell phones are ubiquitous. I think, anybody here not have a touchscreen phone? Yeah, 3 or 4 of you? Right, so give it time. We're basically, what we're entering now is what I like to call the rise of mobile, or the decline of the console. Like in that curve, you can see it leveling out. No new PlayStation, no new Xbox. Since 2007, we've had 6 iPhones, right? We've had, every year there's a new one, and they change. New screens, new sensors, new data connectivity. You sort of get a whole new system every time you buy a new phone. Every time a console comes out, you might not buy one. If you do, you might not get an HD TV or a 5-channel surround sound system or the new sensor for it. And so it's an interesting concept to think about how, how the cell phone, I think, emerges and changes, and that we get a new one every year, whether you buy it or not. The actual phone lifespan for a user is 18 months. So, come on, there we go. Aha. Phone lifespan is 18 months. The emphasis is on multiple aspects of technology. And everybody owns a mobile phone, so it's really a lifestyle device. Everybody has one of these. Chances are, if you don't have a touchscreen phone now, you will have one in 18 months. Come on, there we go. So, all right, so mobile devices, what can those do, right? Well, of course, there are media devices. We know this. You can play movies, listen to music, Angry Birds, read books. But there are also communication devices. You use your phone to make a phone call. You can check your email, Facebook and Twitter, and Instagram, and all these sort of things. And so you have a clashing of, or a combining of these different cultures of communication and self-expression and sort of media consumption. And I think, especially in the field of interactive media, and when you think about documentary these days, Facebook and Twitter are huge now. If you want to document what's happening in the world, these are great spaces to look at. And so these are 2 examples of really great projects that have combined film and social media from the ground up by design in great ways. Has anybody here played the Take This Lollipop internet thing? 3 of you, 4 of you? Okay, so definitely something to be paying attention to. Take This Lollipop went viral, 130 million users on Facebook in a month. And it essentially takes your Facebook data, if you allow it to, which you should, definitely worth checking out, and makes a little short film that actually combines your Facebook data inside of it. And then the second one here, come on back, there we go, is Hulu. So I have streaming television and Twitter equals screwed. It was basically this reality TV show, and there's a guy dropped into the bayou with like no know-how on how to use tools and survive. You can communicate with him via Twitter, and in real time he'll be responding to your tweets and actually taking the information you're giving him to like build a raft and escape the bayou. It's really kind of a cool concept, so both worth checking out. In the case of Ajax, we basically combined like a book with movies and a video game engine and photos to create what we did. So for those who don't know the project, I'm just going to show the trailer real quick.
Introducing Operation Ajax for the iPad, based on actual events of the CIA's involvement in overthrowing the Iranian government. A bold and original interactive graphic novel that redefines digital comics and the art of storytelling in 210 handcrafted pages. Navigating the comic is easy and intuitive. Tap or swipe to read the next page or to go back. Touching the middle of the screen gives you more control and lets you dive deeper into the rich history surrounding the story. At the bottom of the screen, we can flip through pages. It's also easy to jump to different chapters. A handy guide can be called up to provide a synopsis of the cast of characters. Occasionally, you'll see a star while reading. Touch it to pull up additional information about key story points, historical documents that have only recently been declassified, and even newsreels from the era. Operation Ajax by Cognito Comics. Experience it at the App Store.
Anyway, so that gives you an idea of what we created, basically combining all of these aspects together. And what's so fascinating to me about this stuff is that the technology used to drive it, because essentially you're building software now when you go to a mobile device, is a big factor in what you can do. Ajax is actually built on top of Unity, a game engine that's very popular, and so that means that we're using real-time 3D to drive the entire experience. So it raises the question, like all those pieces moving around are actually in Z depth, and you could move a camera through them and stuff like that. We didn't really have time to explore it, but I think in the future there's so much to be explored in sort of the mixing and combining of all these different media formats that are normally separate. So, show of hands, how many people here have heard of AirPlay? Okay, a little more. That's better. Last time I asked this, like 5 people, and oh my god. AirPlay is an Apple technology that allows you to connect your mobile device to your television set. And so not only can they do any type of mobile experience or handheld experience, but they can also become living room capable and connect to your ecosystem. And I think will eventually replace your game console, which did like 2 things, right? You could watch movies and play games on it, but the mobile devices, all of that stuff we just talked about, and it can, be both handheld and, in your living room as well. So essentially what I see is the phone becoming more like a controller for like a game console, and, but then you leave and you have all of your mobile, capability as well. And it creates some really interesting opportunities for a narrative that exists not just in your living room and in that attention economy, but also on the go when you are out and about. In terms of fidelity, I mean, games on mobile are looking great now. This is old by today's standards. This is Infinity Blade, and it's already starting to look like anything the PlayStation and the Xbox can do. So again, I don't think it's a concern about how good will these things look, but rather how fun will they be to experience. So when you think about all the things you can mix together now, I don't know what we're going to come up with, but you could combine a game with a film, with social media, with the ability to take photos or read them, plus AirPlay. Who knows, right? It's just a whole interesting concept for that sort of stuff. And so we're sort of on this interesting trajectory now towards the orange dot of the unknown. And I think it's really just a matter of learning from all of these examples and figuring out what works and what doesn't. And just like, there's a lot of, mistakes made along the way and learning as you go to refine something like film, right, which had 100 years to mature. And then video games also sort of hitting that arc. And now all these interfaces are coming in. And I think the bigger question is, how do we go to this great new beyond and do something meaningful and not just do something distraction-oriented or gimmicky, but actually make a deeper, more compelling experience and storytelling experience for audience and for readers. So just to end on one thought, no one really knows what's going to happen with Google Glasses. It may work, it may not. But I think at the end of the day, the question to ask yourself is, how do we do stuff with meaning? How do we make this better than what we've had before? And have a more intimate connection with documentary. Nothing. So if you guys have, thank you. If you guys would like to know more about Operation Ajax, you can check it out. You can Twitter to it. I will Twitter back. And then there's also me. So thank you very much.